Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 259 of our regular shows, and we're recording this one on May 6th, 2023. This is the official podcast for the fan site AvatarTheLastAirbenderOnline.com. I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So, on today's show, we have some pretty interesting news topics to cover, and our review will actually be today's free comic for Avatar as part of the Dark Horse kind of kids comic that is half Star Wars High Republic and half Avatar The Last Airbender. So we'll cover that short story. It won't be a hugely long review just because it's a short comic, of course, but some of the news, I think there is a decent bit to actually get into here. So we'll start off with what I think has been a huge thing over the last couple of weeks and is continuing on and will continue on for the next kind of 2-3 weeks as well. And that is Avatar Generations, so the Avatar mobile game, has had its first timelines update, which is what they're calling it, and has added the Rise of Kyoshi update to the game. And this features, so far, roughly the first third of the first Kyoshi book, and it introduced much of the cast from that section of the book into the game to play as during the story. And over the weeks of the event so far, they've gradually offered these characters for summon, with some of them still to come in the coming days and weeks. But this has been a very, very exciting time because this has been the first time we've seen visuals to go with the otherwise novel focus on Rise of Kyoshi. So all we've had is covers and a couple of pieces of art from the cover artist. Now we have proper, like, Avatar Studios, basically, pieces of official art for all these characters. And they revealed this in the lead up to the event. And as we've gone through it, we've got to see it, how they've done the story as part of the event. It's been very, very exciting. But let's start with some just general thoughts on it. So, Greg, what has been your, I suppose, interaction with the Rise of Kyoshi event and your general kind of thoughts on how it is as someone who has read the book?
Yeah, I think as far as having read the book and starting to see some of the images come out and seeing their, I guess, just general, I guess you could say, like, fanfare, general promotion and marketing, it seems pretty involved, especially considering, it is, a mobile game, which generally doesn't have as much, sort of fanfare for it, I guess. I don't know, maybe it's because there isn't much other sort of, video game content. We see more of it compared to what we might see normally for a mobile type of game. But, from what I've seen from, the various news outlets that have been talking about it, the trailer that they had leading up to it, the trailer and some of the other sort of content that has come out for it, it's been pretty interesting just to see, the reactions to, the character designs or, seeing them in different states than we haven't seen them before. And just, the general, I guess you could say, reception for it and, just what it means for, I guess, adding more content into this mobile game, which you don't typically think of having, these sort of, larger expanse, sort of updates, DLC type things.
Yeah, it is an interesting one because I think after the initial kind of hype around the launch of the game, the reception kind of, I think, turned a little bit kind of sour as people frustrated at, like, where are the updates? What are we doing? And we're going very slowly through Aang's story and we're not really seeing the generations aspect. So this was a much needed update to do the first timelines thing. They actually went out and, like, explained what the timeline feature actually is. Like, it's a whole new activity thing. It is effectively just a different menu to effectively get into the map for the different kind of timelines. So far it's obviously just Kyoshi, but the menu is completely there to be, like, filled in with all of the other characters, and we got that really nice shot of basically all the known avatars, and they didn't include Aang with it, which I thought was a nice choice to highlight that we've already focused on Aang so far. We'll go back to him as well, but we'll be doing the rest of these avatars as well, starting with Kyoshi here. So just in terms of, like, people always freak out about new art, they delivered completely on that front, but I also definitely noticed a lot more people playing the game. as this one came out because they really wanted to interact with the Kyoshi story, see how well they actually did it, and I think most people are actually pretty impressed with it. So I suppose we should take some time to just look through the kind of character designs here for the different Rise of Kyoshi characters. So let's kind of, I suppose, talk about this in basically, I suppose, the order they did it in. So the first ones that we saw were they just randomly, like a couple of weeks actually before the event started, showed off the designs for Heiran, Jonju, and Tagaka. Um, and this obviously got people super excited because it came out of nowhere. Um, People who are following the game knew a little bit from data mining, but like this was the first imagery that came out. Heiran, I think, looks really, really cool. I think they managed to nail the whole idea that like she looks very similar to Rangi. She's just like a kind of older version of Rangi. I definitely get the sort of headmistress vibe kind of from her design as well. Um, I really think they managed to do quite a good job because I do think the novels, like you would say, the descriptions of the characters is maybe not the strongest suit in those books. You're kind of just like, okay, Fire Nation character looks similar to one of the other characters is kind of what you're going off, but made her a unique looking character, I think. So what are your thoughts on Heiran's kind of like official design here?
Yeah, no, actually, I agree with that. It definitely gives you sort of the headmistress sort of vibes from her overall, I guess, sort of look and demeanor that they have her, especially with sort of the thing in her hair as well. So no, I think that definitely worked out pretty well as far as, getting the visual representation of that, which I don't think we really had anything, sort of pseudo official or official for that character compared to some of the other ones where we have had, other designs that we know are sort of inspired or based off of some of the other ones that we are getting finally as well. But no, that one was really cool to see Heiran.
hmm so yeah, Heiran, very nicely done. Jonju then we had. So technically Avatar Generations had shown an image of Jonju before, but it was very similar to a piece of fan art. And this
Yeah.
feels like a much more finalized design here, where they definitely changed it. I think the initial design from the intro had Jonju wearing more of a kind of Earth Sage hat. This one they
Hmm.
don't quite have that, but there are still elements like you can tell a lot of this is ultimately somewhat inspired by some of the fan art that we've seen. But I think he looks very, very cool here. Just the design of like his kind of beard mustache combo, his own top knot, the kind of you have to remember he's from the Ganjin tribe, so as well. So that the white with the kind of Earth Kingdom style and that he is a little bit kind of higher class, given that he's an Earth Sage. I think it really, really works for what they're going for here. And while it's hard to tell from just the one sort of like main image here, I think it gets across his kind of bending style a little bit, that like classic, strong earth bending stance, but he's doing a lot with his hands, which is the way he's described as in the books. But your thoughts on Jonju?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand the idea of sort of his pose that is sort of, I mean, it has sort of the flavor of your typical, I guess, sort of earthbending, but it has some, I guess, sort of style to it, you could say. Again, it is only sort of one image, but from what you can gather from it, it definitely has that feel from it, and yeah, it definitely has sort of the more, I guess you could say, regalness than you might sort of typically see from, other earthbending characters, considering his status, like you say. So no, I think that definitely goes in line as far as what we know of him so far.
hmm Then we have Tagaka, who is the kind of last of the initial reveals. Interesting, given that like this week has sort of been like her week in the event because she's been available to
Yeah.
summon this time out. And yeah, very cool. Another character who I don't think we had any particularly like distinct visual for, but I think most people are super impressed with this design. Of course, she has the classic blade of Tagaka, which we've actually seen before in the game. It was the item that came with the new original character Kiwok, who is half kind of related. It's a bit of a mystery with that character, but yeah, definitely pirate water tribe character. I think people were a
Hmm.
little bit surprised that she kind of maybe comes across a little older than maybe the book gives the impression of, but I don't think the book overly described how exactly old she is. To me, she seems like a little bit of Kaya here, I suppose. Maybe not quite as old, but I love this kind of water tribe, kind of Fifth Nation kind of look for Tagaka here. But your thoughts on her?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it definitely feels like it has a little bit more of, I guess you could say, an edge to the character, but she's a pirate, right? So like that kind of makes sense to me. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. For some reason, the gray sort of hair, which I guess you typically would consider for like older character in the Avatar world at least, doesn't really mean as old to me, or that they're like sort of like lesser because they're older, because just we see older characters in the Avatar world generally can do just pretty much everything that we know, almost as much as the younger characters, within some range and limits, of course. So that sort of worked out for me. But no, overall, I like this character design.
Hmm. Um, Then I suppose we'll complete the set of the Karuk's team avatar here with Kelsong, which I got these images early, but I was told like don't post about them until like it actually came out. So this is like was one of the ones that was the most hardest to like not explain to people in great detail what it looked like. But Kelsong I think is a really kind of cool looking design because it hits to me all of the beats from the book that you're told about him is that like okay he does have a pretty substantial beard, he is a huge kind of man, but not in the sense that they described him as being like fat basically. So I think they got across the idea that like this guy is kind of huge, he's athletic, has the big air nomad beard, but is still an air nomad. And yeah, it was hard to kind of describe the beard to people ahead of time to do it enough justice. But I think ultimately people were impressed when we got Kelsong. And he's probably my most hyped character to actually get in the game as well. I think he's going to be saved until the last week of the event. But your thoughts on Kelsong?
Yeah, I think he definitely has sort of, I guess, the idea that he is a bigger type character, but yeah, definitely is not sort of like, I guess, rotund or anything like that. He's just large in sort of stature. So yeah, I guess along the lines of what they, mostly described in the book, it sort of works that way. And yeah, especially the beard, that definitely comes across as sort of a large type of beard in that sort of way. And but yeah, no, I like his character design. I think it definitely sort of works for what they were going for, and it's nice to see sort of the actual sort of like their sort of, I guess, official representation of the character.
Hmm. And I suppose the last like a like quote unquote new design is basically this is a Kyoshi servant or young Kyoshi, which was cool to see because it's obviously Kyoshi without her makeup. So you have the freckles which are described in the book, of course. And she's wearing her typical kind of more like Earth Kingdom outfit here. Um, Again, this is another kind of thing. I think a lot of people were waiting for this to see official art of Kyoshi without the makeup, and again, I think people are pretty impressed with this. Plus the sort of like comic style expression faces actually in the game as well. So yeah, I think top marks to them for this because like it's a known character, having to sort of like de-age her a little bit to get the design correct here. But any thoughts on young Kyoshi?
Yeah, no, I think that the design they have for her works pretty well. I think from what I've seen, most people were pretty like, cool with it or excited with it to actually get to see it in this sort of framing here. And, especially throughout the game when you play, you get to see a couple different expressions as well. So they've, done a pretty good job of covering the range of it too as well.
We do have other, of course, images for Rangi. Now, she, from the Legends RPG game, already has sort of like an official piece of art in like the show art style. So this is just more of kind of her. But it's nice to see like more of it come out and kind of like perfect this style for the character. And the mainly I think we pointed out kind of before when we discussed this, the kind of pointier old style kind of Fire Nation military uniform, because she's like Lieutenant Rangi, is very
Hmm.
very cool to see with her. We also have a kind of action shot of her kind of doing a kind of flame kind of wheel kick. And again, because we got the Heron design, you can see the kind of elements of like, oh yeah, these two are related. So any thoughts on Rangi here in terms of like the game's depiction of her?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, it worked for me. I mean, we've seen, like you said, we've seen other images of her, even just sort of the cover design. So I think she's the one that we've like had sort of like a mental model of what she would look like already. So I think in terms of them sort of, just continue along that, it turned out pretty well. And especially, when they do have the different sort of expressions and ways that they use her in the game so far, it plays out pretty well, I think.
And then Yoon, who we've seen in the cover artist kind of style, but we haven't. This is our first time actually getting to see in more of an official art style. What's interesting is that the main image we have of him is actually like it's basically just the same image of him, almost just done in a different art style. So very cool. You can see he also has the he doesn't wear shoes kind of effect going on. And again, I think people are a huge fan of Yoon, his character arc, and getting to see more of him, pretty fantastic. And you can see there are elements of kind of Jeonju's design with him, but he has that kind of youthful kind of he is the avatar kind of thing going on as well. But thoughts on Yoon's official art here?
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. You definitely have sort of the useful sort of energy, type of in his character design, the playfulness, sort of the funness that you see of him before, everything goes really down with him and his character later on. So yeah, no, I think that definitely worked out pretty well as you see like later on where you see, sort of like more pose of him and sort of like his sort of like action when different things happen throughout the story. So no, I think they did a pretty good job.
And I suppose we should mention while we're here, they did introduce a brand new kind of game original Kyoshi character. His name is a Water Tribe Waterbender character, and his name is Talaric Tug. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. I don't think his name is said in any of the dialogue that we get. It's quite a long name, but like Talaric Tug or something like that. He seems to effectively be positioned as like kind of Tagaka's like second in command. He's not named in the books, but they've added him in as another named Fifth Nation character here. He's pretty cool, kind of like big, bulky, kind of physical waterbender character. Gives you kind of impressions of kind of like Tonrock a little bit, but of course more pirate themed in that like he's shirtless. He has kind of almost Gazan-esque tattoos on his body. I think it's a very cool design, and he does the kind of classic, covers his arms, shards of ice effect. But do you have any thoughts on this new character, Talaric Tug, and his design?
Yeah, no, that was interesting to get sort of like a new one that you weren't really sort of expecting from the books or whatever. So yeah, no, I think it worked out pretty well for what they're going for. So I like the idea that, they are able to sort of like introduce new things that we haven't really seen. I guess it gives them a little bit of liberty, and we'll see if they include that in any other sort of media going forward.
And I suppose we should get now into sort of how they actually did the story. So like I said earlier, what we have here so far is effectively the first third or so of the book. The story content so far in the game ends like in like almost like the scene directly after the big Tagaka fight scene on the iceberg. We get like the immediate kind of aftermath scene where like Jeonju talks to Kyoshi a little bit more because he's now interested in her since she's officially the Avatar, or at least is very confused about who is the Avatar for sure. And like we're just about to get to like the glowworm scene and the crazy sequence of events that kind of properly set Kyoshi on her path. I'm at the point now where I'm pretty sure almost like they might add in a little bit more story with the update, not next week but the week afterwards, because I'm pretty sure a lot of the data relating to like say Jeonju, Kelsang, and Heiron as characters in the game isn't in there yet. So I think the last week will have a bit of a more substantial update, and I think to make that work they probably have to do a little bit more of the story. So I think there's probably a bit more to come ultimately. But overall, from what you've seen of the story, how well do you think this adaptation was, going from obviously a quite detailed and lengthy novel here to what is effectively maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours of gameplay if you're taking it somewhat kind of leisurely?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen of it, since I haven't gotten through all of it myself, I mean, it looks like they've done, I suppose like a fairly well job of doing it, because I mean, you do have the visuals to go along with it, which does add a bit to it compared to sort of, them describing everything in the book and whatnot like that. So I definitely think it sort of works along those lines, especially for, I guess, what is essentially just sort of like a mobile game that has sort of like a storyline through it. So, it has this sort of, visual novel sort of feel to it in terms of that with, the battles and stuff that you can participate in and stuff like that.
For me, I thought they did a very good job. Like, in a way, compared to like how they did the Aang stuff, I actually thought the portrayal of the story was actually a little bit better here, because I think they knew they almost needed to do a little bit more. Because if they left out like all of the details, people would be frustrated. But I think there's
Mm,
been an understanding about like why they can't explain every single like minute detail. But I think they hit most of the key beats. There's a few things where like the narration in the book gets you up to speed straight away, where it's maybe a little bit more glossed over here. But you have the sort of, they're not like full on cut scenes, but you get the sort of scene shot of the art where it's not just the characters like um on the corner of the screen with the dialogue. You actually get a full like scene image of like key moments. So at the start it's Kyoshi running away with one of the Avatar relics, and later on in the story you get like a full scene depiction of like Tagaka's attack, and then Janju as kind of counterattack at the end. Um, those all I think really help to just like give some sense of a visual to it,
hmm
and then you actually do the gameplay to kind of go through it. So, um, I thought that was quite well done. You maybe wish there was a little bit more they could do with the story, but interestingly, there is also like a little bit of original story content as well, because they do this in the exact same way they do the Aang side of the story, which is that you kind of you do the plot from the episode that you know, but then before you leave the area, they sort of ask you to almost like go back through the area to sort of fully unlock it, just for sort of like grinding materials. And there's a slight extra bit of story there. So our two locations that we get in this update are Yokoya and the Polar Refuge, is what they call like the iceberg. When you go back through Yokoya, you basically get some time with Yoon, Rangi, and Kyoshi as a trio, just going around sort of like gathering food to make food for Heiron, Kelsang, and Janju. And the dialogue here is nice. Like, there's nothing super important, but it's sort of like what you wanted in addition to the book was just like a little bit more time with this trio, the Yokoya trio. And that's exactly what you get here. The Polar Refuge extra story effectively focuses on Talarik Tug, like in the aftermath of Tagaka's defeat, that like he's extremely loyal to her, and he's almost like willing to sacrifice the whole rest of the Fifth Nation to try and get her back. But some of the captives left over from the whole iceberg incident, one of them manages to sort of like emotionally get through to him and be like, basically live, don't kill yourself just for Tagaka, live to fight another day. So they get a nice little emotional moment across there to give like Talarik Tug a slight bit of characterization. But it's nice. It's in the same vein as a lot of the extra content in the actual like Aang story, where like, oh, the dojo master, who is this character type stuff. But did you see any of that like little bits of extra content that we got?
A little bit. I saw a couple people look through a little bit of that sort of extra stuff, and I think I saw some of your stuff too as well. So I think it's neat that I guess they're willing to do a little bit more, even if it's just for the sake of gameplay purposes and sort of materials and stuff like that. So I think if it helps the game and people are enjoying it, then I think it's worth it for them to keep going with that.
So, yeah, like I said, the event continues on. Tagaka is this week. Yoon is going to be offered starting on Tuesday. Is going to be the next summon banner. There's a little bit of a mystery surrounding where exactly Heiron is going to be, because I don't think we know a lot about like what way that's going to work. But we're very, very confident that the final week of the event is going to be a banner where you can get Janju and Kelsang as Peace Chaos characters. So they use the kind of purple summon ticket instead of the normal one. But there hasn't been one of those banners in quite a while, so most people should probably have some of them saved up. And they've done some quality of life stuff where they've reduced the kind of what they call like the pity rate, where like if you don't get the characters, like you can eventually like lower this number down until you're eventually guaranteed the character. So it was like 300, it's now down to 200, which is actually very, very helpful to allow people to get these characters. I think the kind of general thoughts is that Heiran is going to be offered perhaps in the middle of all of this as like a slightly easier to get character. So you get one of the kind of Karuk Team Avatar members, but we don't know exactly how that's going to go. But in general, what I've seen, most people are pretty impressed with the way they've kind of executed on the Kyoshi characters in the game. Rangi is actually like a really good like damage dealer, kind of offensive character. The Avatar Kyoshi, so the kind of fully realized Avatar Kyoshi, has like some crazy kind of combos if you kind of utilize her correctly. Even young Kyoshi that they actually kind of more or less give you for free is actually a somewhat unique and interesting character. And then Yoon, I think people are looking forward to actually getting their hands on in a couple of days. But, that's just some quick opinions on that. And it obviously makes things very exciting going forward with the game, where they've more or less said they've given a hint of a roadmap. I think they've confirmed that there is some sort of a roadmap coming. But they've more or less said the plan is to sort of alternate the big updates to the game back and forth between Aang's story and timelines. So the next update we would expect to just continue Aang's story, but then after that I think we're expecting the next part of Kyoshi's story. But they've also said that there is another era coming to the game before the end of the year. I think everyone is leaning towards it being Korra, because they probably need to get that started at some point. But I don't think we know that completely for sure. But I think once they get multiple generations in the game, the interest from I think a lot of people is going to go way, way, way up. So that's pretty exciting that they seem to have a better plan about what they actually want to do. And so, that big image they posted with all the avatars is kind of exciting to see when like Karuk is coming, when Roku's coming, that sort of. But yeah, it's a cool update. And obviously, when the event is over, it's not like all the Kyoshi stuff goes away. You'll still be able to play that story. Timeline is going to be there. The timeline shop will remain. We don't know exactly what way they're going to do it, but like obviously the limited time banners over the course of this event will go away. But they will, I think, at the end introduce a just timeline banner general. That way, if you want characters that aren't Aang era, you don't have to like hope you get lucky with like the giant list of characters. There will be a smaller list of specific other era characters. Will be interesting to see how they execute on that. But yeah, that has been the big Kyoshi update. But then we move on to what is arguably like a bigger piece of news than even that. Coming out of pretty much nowhere, because I wasn't seeing much hype at all heading into this thing, but CinemaCon 2023 happened a couple of weeks ago at this point, and what basically happened was that a report came out from the Paramount panel where they were showing off stuff about their movies, keeping in mind that these panels and stuff like that are purposely meant to be private. They're only shown to sort of people involved in the industry, and even this place that was reporting on them was making it very clear we're allowed to like text report on them but not show any visuals. The news came out that they showed off an image to highlight the 2025 Aang ATLA movie coming out, and this obviously got fans a bit frustrated that like, why would you even report on that in a way that like, ooh, we get to see something you guys don't? Because this is technically the second time this has happened, because it was at the Annecy Film Festival last year. They apparently showed a teaser image, and now we got this other one. They were able to describe that, hey, like 5 members of Team Avatar are in this, and Katara, Zuko, Sokka, Toph. They look really cool, but everyone was just kind of like, can you be a bit more descriptive about this? And we weren't really getting anything, and everyone had just settled on the idea of like, well, maybe they'll show us the same image at one of the Comic Cons if we wait long enough. But then pretty much the day afterwards, everyone just sort of wakes up to like, hey, the image is leaked, and there's a lot of like, should we post it? Can we post it? Some people just did. I was quite hesitant about it, which I think was ultimately the right move given what happened. But everyone was talking about it, of course. I suppose before we get into a lot of the details about this, what was your story about like how you came across this? Like, did you just kind of like come online and it was just everywhere, or did you kind of come across this earlier on before it had spread?
No, I think I saw people reporting about it and just sort of general messaging about sort of image and sort of where it was coming from and stuff like that. And I didn't even actually really try to like search out of it in any sort of way or anything like that. I think I saw your thing on it as well as some other people. And then I think I just was on Instagram and I think someone posted like a story about it, and so I saw it that way. But yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of talk about it, but I didn't see it as much, at least in terms of where I was looking, in terms of it being actually posted for quite a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, it was interesting because I'd say for I feel like someone sent it to me on like Twitter that like, hey, this image is out there, and I'm kind of like, oh, okay, what do I do with this now? Because clearly from the event we knew we're not really meant to have seen this, but then when the source kind of began to come out, and it's like, wait, this isn't like exactly like leaked in the way something is typically leaked, because it was just like an official like Getty's image and like other kind of those type of image websites by like a professional photographer, because like you had to be part of the industry to be in the room to see this panel. Like it's not that someone just snuck in there and did this. Like they had to have, like, I guess, known the rules, signed the whatever it is, NDAs or something like that, to know like they're not meant to post this. And there was this image there, so this image of like a lot of their other stuff that they have coming out as well. And everyone was just like, hey, it's up on Getty Images. Like it's not like some fan like somehow found a way to kind of sneak this out. Like it's just an official photographer, I think, just either didn't know the rules and just posted what he took pictures of, or I don't even know specifically what happened. So it was up for a couple of hours, but once it sort of caught on and a lot of the big people in the fandom like started posting about it, then suddenly all the links to the Getty Images stuff started going to like, image not found, so it was clearly taken down. And then I know Avatar News specifically said he was contacted by Paramount to like remove the image. So that kind of made a lot of people go like, "Ooh, should I remove it too?" And now I think they were like aggressive in the sense that I think they were like, "Can you please take this down?" But they weren't like, I think, really like violent in sort of how they did this. I don't think people were getting like copyright strikes and stuff like that. I think any stuff I heard from other YouTubers was sort of just like they kind of they claimed the video rather than striking the video. So I think they knew not to go nuclear on this, but they still kind of tried to suppress it. Was the basic idea here. But yeah, so it was a kind of weird one, but it's still funny going on every day onto Twitter and just seeing like occasionally people be like, hey, this image again. And all the different kind of like edits of people focusing in on each character. Like they've tried to suppress it, but like the fandom have it now. Just there was a couple of hour period where it just spread to everyone, and now we know what it is. It was just a hilarious kind of situation. But what were your what was your experience with like then the kind of it beginning to get taken down all over the place?
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to like, put the genie back in the bottle after it's been open and stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to see them sort of like retroactively pull it down. So clearly it was, put up, ill-informed, even if it was on sort of like an official, image website or anything like that. But yeah, I think, it's one of those things that it's just like sort of hard to keep it under wraps when there's just too many people involved with it. So I don't know. It's interesting that we did get to see it at least.
Yeah, so let's actually now talk about this. So it's a pretty clean image. Like there's maybe a little bit of like almost like overexposed lighting, like just over like Katara's head, where you kind of wonder like, is that just the lighting in the room or something like that? But for the most part, it's a very, very clean image. You can clearly make out what everything is. And yeah, like I said earlier, we have Aang in the middle, we have Katara on one side of him, Sokka on the other. Toph is on one side of the image next to Sokka, and then Zuko's kind of like doing a fire kick right beside Katara on the other side of the... It was initially reported that they're standing in front of like a snow mountain, but it's pretty clear looking at it that they're just in like a city of some... Now maybe this is where it being overexposed, we can't fully tell what's exactly in the background, but it's clear that
Hmm.
there's at least three or four buildings in the background. Is it Republic City? We don't know, but it's very, very cool. It is clearly Avatar art style. To me, the image was immediately recognizable as being Avatar art style, but obviously it is the characters uh, in the age that they will be in this movie, which is rumored and more or less confirmed because I think those rumors came from like casting things which listed the age of the characters. So this is meant to be, I think, 24-year-old Aang,
Yeah.
26-year-old Katara. Toph would also be 24. Sokka would be 27. Zuko would be 28. That fits to me perfectly. Like Aang still looks pretty young here, but you can tell like he's taller. He looks much more like he does in like the Korra flashbacks or the Old Friends poster. You can see that like Sokka is at that kind of interesting transition point where he looks like bigger, bulkier, and stuff like that. Toph is a lot taller. Zuko's hair is very, very long. Um, it's a cool image, but overall, Greg, what are your impressions when you first saw it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a cool image. I mean, it has all the sort of, typical feel of sort of like a team action avatar pose, getting stuff done type of feel to it. So no, I think, in terms of that, if that's what they're trying to show off, and the excitement, the coolness of whatever it is they're doing in the movie, I think it accomplishes that.
Yeah, and to me, this image like solves like a lot of the kind of confusion around everything because like just everyone seeing this image, I think they're like, oh, that's what Avatar Studio like. It's the movie we've wanted since 2008. Like exactly. Like the characters are kind of older, but not like so old. It's like the Korra flashback stuff. Um, it's they seem to be together as a team for the most part. Potentially in like an early Republic city. It's kind of everything that we wanted, and just like in a way, I'm surprised that they were so strict on trying to pull the image down because it's not that they just publicly like ignored the fact that there was a little bit more interest in the Avatar movie. Like on the official Instagram, they actually like reposted the date the movie came out, that is going to come out, but with a very vague like just like tagline of just like the Avatar continues. Like they didn't even say it was like Ang Team Avatar animated movie. They're just like Avatar this date and assumed that you were meant to know. Whereas just adding in this one image would have just completely solved all the problems, especially when there is confusion about like Netflix live action because there's like no information on that. People are so confused about different projects and what's coming first, which is where, and especially with the animation stuff, a lot of people still think it's going to be in like 3D CG animation, and this makes it very clear it's still going to be traditional Avatar animation. So it's good to have this out there to just kind of show people this is the movie that we're actually getting. And for me, I'm kind of like, this is probably gonna like keep me kind of satisfied for quite a while. Like that, just the kind of pressure of like the first look is sort of out of the way now, and it means that like if they maybe don't deliver at the Comic Cons this year, we still have this to kind of go on and build up maybe more for the 2024 information cycle. Um, that's the way I view it. Is just that like okay, they didn't want it to come out, but this has really helped the fandom, I think, to see this. But what's your thoughts on it from just like the general reception, like where the fandom is at with Avatar Studios and all these projects? Do you think this image is kind of done as much as I'm kind of making it out like it's done?
I don't know. I mean, I think for those of us who are paying attention and stuff like that, it probably has. Because we know about it. We knew about it, as soon as it was mentioned. But I I don't know if I feel that way in terms of like the general audience or general sort of people that are just sort of passively sort of interested in it, because it's not like it's around the corner, like it's
Mm.
still a couple years away. Which I guess considering that, I could see why they wouldn't necessarily put this in any of their sort of like official media package, because who knows if it's going to stay exactly like this. And some people, aren't as sort of, excited about this image as, you and me may be about this. So, I don't know. I think it could go sort of either way. I think, it would be cool if something along the lines of this image, as well as maybe, something more descriptive was at sort of the cons. I think that would be something cool, especially sort of more sort of public facing that, they sort of like officially release that they can actually put on their, sort of YouTube, their, Instagram, their social media stuff in general. So I think, there probably is more they can do with this image if, this is the official thing and how they're going to go with it, which we know it's official to some degree because they were showing the press. It's just, how much is it going to, stay along these lines when it, comes to fruition in, a couple years.
Mm. Yeah, like there's always that weirdness about like yes, I agree that like in a way until the official social media accounts like the YouTube account with like 2 million subscribers, until they get a chance to post something like this officially, a lot of people will still remain confused because they'll realistically only get the news if it comes from there, or the likes of an IGN or something like that is able to just blatantly post this image. Because I think some of the bigger
Yeah.
websites did what like it was like some of the crew on Avatar Studios actually like kind of retweeted like one of the news posts that posted about this. So um that was a bit of an interesting one. But it did eventually get taken down. Like you could go to that article, but the image isn't there. It's described. I think the image is still in the sort of like thumbnail kind of like header kind of image, but it's not like properly there.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a but you know it's going to be interesting to see how they do this because it's like yes we are still like 2 and a bit years away from the movie, but we also have been waiting 2 and a bit years. So it's this weird middle time where I feel they probably should have shown something at this point, especially because it isn't just one random movie, it's like a full studio, and the fact that we still know so little about Avatar Studios is a bit odd. In that like still no website, social media channels still haven't properly updated. They can get away with this first movie because they can obviously they have they can completely go for like Avatar: The Last Airbender tagline of movie. They don't fully have to have the full like what is the name of the franchise stuff fully planned out, but is that being planned in the background? You do wonder like what the situation is there. But I think we probably should discuss sort of like the style here because you mentioned there that there are other people out there who were not as positive. I don't think I've seen any like heavy like harsh criticism. I've seen a bit of sort of just like you know I looked at the image and it didn't quite seem what I wanted. Like almost this indescribable thing for some people that it didn't look quite right, exactly the way they wanted it to. And I had a discussion with a few people on this, and um, it's hard because like my opinion on it is just like that, immediately recognizable as Avatar. To me, this looks like the ATLA style, the Korra style, just slightly updated because it's basically been like 10 years since the last time we saw like official imagery for an animation like this. Um, the I've seen some people mention like it's is it a little bit too like anime or something like that, but I'm also kind of like, but Avatar like basically is that like sure like okay it's a Korean animation studios for most of what we've had, but we have had a Japanese animation studio involved as well. But Avatar style to me is more in line with anime than like your typical kind of Western animation. So uh, I don't know. There's a kind of weirdness about that, but certainly I think the characters, like it's the same level of detail I would expect from an Avatar or a Korra. Um, I'd almost say like it's maybe the bending effects where like it maybe looks a little bit kind of like different than you might expect. But that's kind of my general thoughts on this. Is that like I feel the style here, like if there's anything that this is representative of, it's probably of the style. I think maybe the character designs might be tweaked slightly, but I think like this is our art style for Avatar Studios because we were always expecting it to be this way once Brian clarified that they're not doing anything wild with the style. They're keeping it like 2D but using sort of technological advancements to keep it like up to speed with what's going on in animation. I I think it looks good. But what are your thoughts on the style and the approach here as our first like Avatar Studios like animation image?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how much we can consider this in terms of animation, because again, it's still far away and it's not like we're seeing this in motion, like it's a still frame. Um, as far as that goes, like I don't have any, particular sort of like harsh sort of criticism about them. I mean, I think, like you said, the water effects and some of the other sort of bending effects, yeah, I think I can see there where you might sort of be like, okay, that might be a little bit iffy, but again, sort of any most of the bending effects, especially when they're sort of like upgrading them and stuff like that, they don't particularly look the greatest in sort of still frames. Like you really have to like design them for a still frame in order for them to look really good in still frames. So if this is, say like an actual motion image that we're just taking a screen cap of, then yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that it looks a little bit wonky in the motion there. And again, it's not like this is like an official sort of like, downloaded image from the actual, movie or anything like this. Like it is sort of like someone's a picture of a picture. So
Mhm.
considering that in mind, you have to take that in fact in terms of like, sort of the quality and stuff like that. But the overall sort of feel of it, sort of like you were saying, sort of like the anime-esque-ness of it, that sort of feels sort of like in line with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think, for the longest people have always been like, so is Avatar anime? And we're like, no, it's not because it's made in Korea, so technically it's not. But like we said, one of the seasons was actually done in Japan, so like, does that count for it actually being anime? So, but again, it's still produced here in the States, right? So there's that all sort of like back and forth that we're always going back and forth with the fans and the hardliners and stuff like that. But no, in terms of the animation, I feel like it's more in line to me in terms of like the more sort of like I guess recent sort of animation that we're seeing on sort of like Netflix and other sort of platforms where, maybe it's made in Japan, maybe it's made in Korea, maybe it's made in, other sort of places that are just sort of imitating that sort of, sort of traditional sort of style that we've sort of come to see on a lot of animated projects that aren't sort of more along the lines of the full sort of CG toon shade type of mode of animation, which, depending on which places are doing it, can also be quite as good as well. So, no, and they've said that they'll explore stuff like that and whatnot for other projects. But as far as we can tell from this one, it, definitely feels like it's more along the lines of what we're used to seeing in terms of, sort of the flow and feel of the animation that we've come to sort of I guess sort of generally expect for most of the Avatar projects. So as far as that goes, it feels like it's sort of in line with that. I'm, more curious to see how it looks in sort of like emotion when maybe it's not sort of, a little bit sort of overexposed, like you said earlier. So yeah, but I mean, in terms of everything else, it feels pretty cool. I'm definitely curious to see how, in a couple of years, how it actually moves and everything like that.
Hmm. Yeah, like as far as I'm aware, like what they were shown was literally just an image. Like I don't think there was any like motion to it. It's not like it was like even like a GIF or anything like that. No video or anything like that. I think it is just like a still image. It is a promo image of for this movie. That's what it is. Um. So is that representative? Because again, like sometimes, we of course know there is a difference between like taking a screenshot of like the animation versus a specifically crafted like promo image. And there's always going to be
Mhm.
those kind of differences. Like the first ever image of Korra is probably like the best like comparison to this. Like her kind of like she has her back to like the shot the way we're seeing it. We're overlooking Republic City.
Yeah.
That was ultimately pretty representative of like what we got in terms of like the style of that image compared to the style of the animation. You could tell like Korra's character design evolved like a little bit, but it's ultimately very, very accurate. And that was like two and a bit years before Korra premiered, and that's where we're at here. Because you have to assume like it's been two and a bit years, like they have to be somewhat finalized in some of this stuff. Yes, little bits and details are gonna change, but to me, if they're willing to show this image to like a room with like hundreds of people, and allow certain like news outlets to even describe the image. I feel there's some level of like finalize ultimately because they'd have to have the designs locked in to like start the animation. And if it's going to be like a longer movie style animation process, they have to lock it in sooner rather than later. So like some of the people like on one of my videos was like, oh, I'm not quite feeling it. I think they need the 2.5 years to kind of finalize the designs. And I don't think that's how the production works. I think by the time we're even like a year from now, they'll be right in the middle of like animating this, and like the designs will be finalized like months ago. But we probably should take some time to talk about like how each of the characters look here. So I suppose we'll just go across here. So Zuko up, flying kick going on here. It was noted before that like the description of the image was that he has a really long ponytail. He actually just has really long hair. He still has the classic kind of top knot thing, but his hair is very very long. Now it is in line with what he looks like in the Old Friends poster, but he's obviously clearly younger here. The main thing to note here is probably that this is like the kind of the adult version of his like book 3 outfit for like his I guess his team avatar outfit now, because obviously like he's gonna be Fire Lord in this movie, but he clearly is along with the team for something. He doesn't seem in like full Fire Lord regalia here, so interesting. But he is further into the background than some of the other characters. But I think he looks pretty good overall. I like that it is the transition between like where we see him now in the comics and the poster that we've had for a few years. But what are your thoughts on Zuko?
Yeah, I think that sort of transition, I guess, sort of time for his age and his character feels about right, and goes along with everything that we've learned about for this movie so far. So yeah, I think his overall character design, the outfit that he has, and it feels like it's sort of I guess appropriate for what they might be doing in this movie, especially if he's not sort of working along the whole lines of his current position, his status, and his regained honor and everything like that. So yeah, I think that's definitely it works for me what they have right now.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Katara, who is right up front here with Aang. So it's probably Katara and Aang who we get like the best looks at. Katara, her design here seems very similar to her book 2 outfit, the kind of like warm weather water tribe clothing, kind of looser and stuff like that. But the main interesting thing here is that she obviously still has like classic hair loopies. Her hair is somewhat long, of course. It's like a sort of like kind of slightly hybrid style between like I suppose yeah, it's basically kind of like she basically has in the comics at the moment. A little bit of her book 3 hairstyle. Still has the necklace, of course. But as a lot of people have pointed out, the most probably interesting part here is the kind of a yellowy orange kind of ribbon, kind of like belt, which is over the top of some sort of a kind of leather belt or kind of like piece of armor. I don't really know what way to describe it, but that's the kind of truly unique thing here. But you could tell that Katara does look older here, and I think people are pretty impressed with how it looks here. If there is maybe time for a redesign, you maybe wonder like, is the general overall outfit, is it a little bit too similar to her book 2 outfit? But I think there's some details, like you can tell on what like her right shoulder, there's like a little bit of a pattern there that we can't quite see with her hair in the way, but it's general, like pretty impressed overall. But your thoughts on Katara?
Yeah, no, I like her design in this one. I think it definitely feels like it's been updated enough from what we've seen before, but it still falls in line with what we've seen for her for the past books and everything like that. And yeah, the yellow sash definitely does stand out as far as like a unique addition to her outfit, along with I guess sort of her sort of the piece that's below it as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think it works for me. I think the characters evolve and change over time, so the fact that we see something a little bit different, I think is good.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Aang, who obviously is wearing classic, Air Nomad colors here, some kind of yellows, oranges, a bit more kind of red, kind of like very, very dark orange. And there's elements of, like it is a little bit like kind of Tenzin's design here, but the unique thing again here is that he's wearing kind of like blue wrist wraps. So there's a lot of people kind of pointed out from like a shipping kind of thing that like, oh, Katara and Aang seem to be wearing a little bit of each other's nation's kind of colors, which is that intentional or not? I'm not particularly sure, but it is notable that otherwise, like their outfits are their own nation, with just one slight difference being these kind of two pieces. But yeah, it looks cool. Like he's obviously very, very tall here. I've seen some people mention that like his eyes are very big, but I'm just like, I do not see it at all. Like literally, I just typed Aang into Google there. First image that comes up from an early episode of ATLA, Aang has big eyes. He's always had big eyes. They don't even seem particularly big in the image, even though he's directly facing the camera. So I'm not sure about that. That might just be, I think, people nitpicking a little bit, trying to see a problem there. But Aang, I think, looks really, really cool. But your thoughts on Aang?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because his eyes are just sort of open wide and has that sort of look to him that they're sort of, mentioning that. But otherwise, it feels like an older version of Aang, which we've seen older versions of Aang's. Obviously, the main one that we've seen is quite a bit older than this one. Since this Aang doesn't have any sort of like facial hair on him or anything like that, so he still has some youthfulness to him. And I'm sure if we were to see him like smile or anything like that, it'd probably be like spot on for what we've seen before in the past. So no, I think the design looks cool. The idea that is sort of feels like sort of Tenzin's outfit, which just makes sense because this is where sort of the sort of history, the lineage sort of comes from and everything like that. Just that obviously Tenzin's is newer and more updated than Aang's, of course. So no, I think the design for Aang here and everything about his pose and everything, it pretty much feels along the lines of what I would expect for Aang.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Sokka here, who there's actually, I think, quite a bit to talk about here because in a way he kind of it feels like the most kind of changed from even where he's kind of furthest along here, where we're almost in the comics, I think, kind of waiting for him to like make the big step up to kind of be more of a leader character and show that off a little bit more. And you can see here like he's much more kind of like muscular, kind of well built. His weaponry is of note. He doesn't seem to have a sword, so his space sword obviously hasn't been found yet because he still seems to have the boomerang holder and the kind of the club that he typically rolls with. Still has the kind of the warrior's kind of like a wolf kind of tail hairstyle. He's facing away from the camera, so you can't like fully make out, but this looks like he's meant to be 27 here, so this to me seems like perfect Sokka. And like Zuko, it feels like they're going for a kind of like middle of the road kind of design here, in between those two designs, and I think it works quite a lot. Wish the space sword was here, so I wonder like will that ever be addressed? But what are your thoughts on Sokka?
Yeah, maybe this whole movie will be about him getting his space sword back. But yeah, no, the overall design I think works really well. I don't know, he definitely feels, maybe it's just because we can see more of his face a little bit more, even if it's just a sort of side profile, but he definitely feels like he has more of the mature look than what we've seen before. Like he's definitely I guess grown up and matured and has, those sort of more angles. It's not a sort of round type of face as, sort of what he had before, which could just be the way that they're designing the characters in general. And, it's not like we have the greatest view of all of their faces right now. But yeah, he definitely, I don't know, his look definitely feels like I think out of all of them feels like the most sort of like distinct sort of updated look per the style of what this movie may be going for in terms of like people saying it looks more like anime-esque and stuff like that, which again doesn't really bother me, but I can see how that could upset some people. It definitely feels like it goes along those lines, which I think is kind of cool. I think I like that he has sort of like a bit more of a different take on his look here.
And I suppose a little thing that stood out to me is just like the color of his clothing. Obviously the lighting is a bit weird, like both in terms of I suppose the picture of a picture, but also even within the image itself. It seems like different shades of blue, almost a little bit green compared to like Katara, who has your classic Water Tribe blues and stuff like that. There's definitely a little bit of like almost like turquoise or something like that going on with him. What do you make of the color of Sokka's?
Yeah, I wonder if that's just because of how they're sort of designing his character design and how he's going to interact with his clothing and stuff like that, or if that's more along the lines of like where he's currently been like traveling or his allegiance or something like that, or if they're trying to hark back to something else that we know not quite aware enough of because of the story stuff in general. So yeah, it definitely feels like his design isn't sort of like super, I guess, sort of your traditional sort of like water tribe look. I don't know if that's because maybe like they're in sort of like the warmer weather or climate or something like that, or just because that's just sort of the style that he wants to go for what he's doing at this point in time. So yeah, that's definitely something of note compared to some of the other ones that feel like they're straight their nation's sort of outfit.
And then we have Toph on the other side of the image, riding atop a boulder, as you would expect. Um, and yeah, she has a little bit more going on with her outfit as well. Her kind of like underlying outfit is sort of classic, kind of like tan and green for the Earth Kingdom. She still has the kind of thing in her hair, her kind of classic hairstyle. But interestingly, she's wearing some sort of a kind of like vest cloak thing that has like some interesting kind of shoulder pads on it. As well as she kind of like Katara also has some sort of a like kind of a bigger kind of like belt thing, kind of like torso armor almost, and then like a belt kind of holding it in place. Um, I think it looks very cool. Like you sort of wonder like is that saying anything? Because like she has the kind of classic Earth Kingdom colors, but then the shoulder pads almost feel like kind of Republic City police officer colors, but it clearly doesn't seem like an outfit. So unless she's sort of like Marshall Toph or something like that in really early Republic City, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But the vest cloak thing with the shoulder pads is an interesting one, but it works. It makes her design here feel a little bit different. But what are your thoughts on Toph?
Yeah, it definitely does make her sort of stand out, but I think that feels like per her character and her personality, that feels like that's sort of like spot on, that she might wear something that, even though she can't see it, of course, it's a bit more sort of like flashy and draws attention to her. Her whole idea of, sort of being the greatest earthbender alive and everything like that. So I think, it works for me how they have it right now. And I don't know, I'm pretty curious to see how it all works as sort of like a full ensemble.
And yeah, like I think for me, like probably the only weakness here is just that like it's a Team Avatar shop, but there's no Suki. Like I'm not going to make too much of a fuss about it because I get that like fundamentally from a marketing perspective, they're always going to consider these five to be the main Team Avatar, but like Suki is part of the team, so you know why isn't she here in a way? It kind of adds a little bit more balance to the team having the other non-bender. There is the relationship with Sokka, which we don't fully know the kind of like details of. And again, I'd like to see Suki's design in that, like, does she, like full Kyoshi warrior outfit, or would she go for more of her kind of like without the makeup kind of looks sometimes, like we've seen. But people have noted that it's one of those things where right now I wouldn't be too worried about like Suki's inclusion or lack of inclusion. Maybe much closer to the release of the movie, if we're still not seeing Suki anywhere, that's maybe a time to get a little bit concerned, but not right now. But do you have any thoughts about this? Do you think they're just going for the obvious main characters, or say something about Suki that she's not here?
I don't know. I think it's too early to say anything about that in terms of, is she like, would she like not be in the movie at all or something like that? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's always the weird one because I mean, yeah, she didn't. She's not part of the original core and the start and everything. But no, she comes up pretty early. Earlier than some of the other characters. But I guess in terms of like, our highlight characters and our core sort of like bending crew plus Sokka, I can see, I get why she's not there. But yeah, I don't know. I do wonder sort of like how they're going to do sort of her involvement with the team in general, considering what we've seen, from like the comics and stuff like that. How that's going to sort of play out, or they're going to, do something drastic that, will upset half the fandom.
Yeah, it will be interesting. But we will move on from that. We'll see if this image pops up officially anywhere. It was like, oh, where have we seen this one before? But we have a piece of merchandise news, and that is that a new statue has been announced and will actually be available for pre-order in just a few days. This is from First Four Figures, who are actually a pretty well-known kind of statue figure manufacturer. They recently got the Avatar license, and this is going to be their first Avatar figure. So it's been slowly revealed over the last couple of days with silhouettes and stuff like that, but now we have proper images of it. We'll get more when the pre-order goes live. But this is an interesting thing because they do different versions of basically the same figure. There is a 11-inch PVC, but then there's like the same figure that will be 13-inch PVC with a bigger resin base that will obviously increase the price of the figure. It's Book One Aang on an air scooter, the kind of standard version of the figure, on a kind of like grass base with a little bit of air effect parts. That's the kind of 11-inch figure. I think one of the additions is like that figure with lights in the air scooter, and it's like moving lights to give the swirling effect, which is kind of interesting. And then just recently they showed off, I think, what the deluxe base is going to look like, and it's obviously much bigger, still has the lights, has a much bigger sort of like air effect. There's a few more layers to the base as well, and you've got one of the kind of classic like Avatar intro kind of like stone monuments in the background as well. And that one I think is going to be much more expensive. If you sign up, I think you get for like on their website for like an email notification, you get $20 off when it goes live. They haven't said what the pricing is, but looking at their other figures, my assumption would be that the standard version of the figure should probably be around maybe 100, 120, maybe a little bit more, and that like literally it will be probably double that if you want the crazy resin base giant one. So a little bit more on the high end here. But I do think the figure overall looks very nice. I think it's one of the companies that has just come out straight away and just gotten, I think, stuff like Aang's face right straight off the bat. It seems like one of the much better attempts at it. And I'll keep an eye on this one in terms of like the price. Because I like I've said before, I have a little bit of Book One Aang fatigue because everyone starts with Book One Aang. But it's a very nice looking statue, and if the price is right, it might be something I go in for. But what are your thoughts on this First Four Figures Aang statue?
Yeah, no, this is definitely, I feel like you said, like one of the better ones, from the get-go in terms of Aang and sort of the overall design of the base and the air scooter and everything like that. So no, I think this is definitely one of the cooler ones, especially since it does have a version that, does have some extra effects to it and stuff like that. And it seems like they're doing a couple different versions. So yeah, I definitely understand the whole idea of sort of like Book One Aang sort of fatigue, but it's not like this company has done it before, of course. So like for them, it's like the first one that they're doing, right? And it seems like it's probably one of the better ones. So I could see this being, more preferred over any of the other sort of type of statue ones that we have so far. It's just too bad that this is sort of like so late in the cycle of things that, for us who've already seen it, like we've already considered like 20 other versions of this, of course. But, for people who haven't dived into getting any of these yet, I think this would, if it's in your budget, this would probably be one of the top ones to actually get.
Yeah, like just looking through all these pictures, yeah, there seems to be so many different versions. Like, there seems to be like a normal version and like exclusive version, definitive edition, because there's a variation where it's just Aang on his own. There's a variation where like there's a Momo on Aang's shoulder. I'm not actually sure if there is going to be edition without the lights and sounds, but there might be. And then I assume all those options will be available for the one with the bigger base as well. So bunch of different iterations here, but it also makes it kind of unique that there are those kind of different options where it'll be interesting to see like basically how much they're pricing just Momo being there as compared to the other one, but we'll see what way it works. It's pre-orders are going live on the 9th, so it's only 3 days away. Final piece of news then is going to be something I'm particularly interested in, and that is that Avatar Weiss Schwarz, they have started doing the card reveal. So the set is out June 16th. They started about a week and a bit ago with the full trial deck reveal. So this is the full starter set, which I assume will be the product most people grab to try it out. And they showed off basically every card in here. They didn't show off some of the different alternate rarity versions, but they showed off at least one or two of them. So this is a like blue yellow deck. For the most part, it seems like the theming is on the finale of book one, because the main sort of like combo that you get is Avatar Aang with the climax card Fury of the Ocean Spirit, so Koizilla, and then Katara and Sokka kind of like support for that, and you obviously on the yellow side of things have some like Iroh and some Zhao cards, as well as some other stuff that's pretty interesting, and the cards themselves actually seem like they're pretty nice. Some of them are quite like flavorful as well with the scenes that they're depicting. So I'm pretty impressed so far with what we've seen here overall, and like obviously this is where I'm actually planning to like get quite a few of these cards, because like obviously TCGs plus avatars like everything I really want. So I'm very excited for this. But Greg, what are your thoughts on what we've seen so far of Avatar Weiss Schwarz, so that we're getting to see some cards?
Yeah, it's really good to actually get to see how they work in the layout, because I think, for us who aren't sort of as into the card games as much, it's kind of hard to visualize it. But seeing the way that they're sort of doing the designs, where they're picking, from the show, the different scenes and stuff like that, I think it looks pretty cool how they're actually sort of setting them up. So, I think they look pretty cool.
Yeah, the general way they're doing the art is that most of the cards, the sort of standard rarities, are going to be kind of screenshots from the show, and of course there'll be a lot of different Aang, Zuko's, Kataras, but each card will be different. So you have like ones that are like Aang the boy trapped in ice, but you also have Aang Avatar state, Aang trapped in a cave for like a specific scene, and like Aang seems to be in all colors, which is kind of interesting for the Avatar flavor, and they've already teased that there's going to be some sort of a big kind of level 3 finisher card for that deck if you want to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how exactly they do that. Because if you play 4 colors in Weiss Schwarz, all the colors, it can make it tricky for your deck to function. So what is the card going to do to like pay off your kind of you putting a restriction on yourself almost? So that's really nice. And then they have started to do reveals pretty much like every day during the week, not during the weekend. They've done reveals of a bunch of cards. Every Monday they're doing a content creator, and I'm up next. I'm on Monday. I got some card reveals, so that was really exciting to do, and that video is going live on Monday. I won't spoil anything about it, but I've got some cards to reveal. They did a Weiss Schwarz YouTuber to reveal some Zuko and Iroh and some firebending Aang cards earlier on in the week. Then they revealed some Katang cards, which is kind of cool. They even showed off like the alternate rarity versions, where like it's the same card. Here's like the common version, but then here's the high rarity version you can get if you're lucky, which is going to look really nice in like the crazy foiling that they have. And again, you can see the kind of combos that they're going for here, where like this is a yellow blue combo where like it's the Aang kisses Katara at the invasion scene, focused on Aang, but then you get the kiss scene at the end of the show, and it's a blue card, and it's Katara and Aang, like reciprocated feelings. So there's cool kind of flavorful combos across the set. They revealed some Suki cards then, firebending Aang cards, and then the most recent reveal was they showed off the two rarity versions of a Sokka card just yesterday.
Yeah.
So that was really cool to see, and you can see the different kind of like rarities and what they go for, where the main set is screenshots, and then the alternate rarity stuff for the most part it seems like that's where you're going to get your more promo material art. And I think that makes sense, because it's probably easier for them to design the foiling effect around the images, where they probably just, I suppose, have like the high quality images with the transparent backgrounds already, and they can design the foiling effect around that. That's probably why they do it that way. But any thoughts on some of the kind of more individual reveals that you've seen? Like any particular kind of images, kind of thematic cards that have stood out to you so far?
I mean, yeah, the soccer one was really cool. I really did like that one, especially the one where it's him when he's training with the sword and everything like that. I think that's a cool one to actually use in terms of his card design. But yeah, no, I don't know, for the ones that they've revealed so far, Yeah, the Zuko ones are pretty cool. I did see that video, so that's cool to see that you're part of that as well. But yeah, no, I think I like the Aang ones, even those ones I think are pretty cool just to see them. Just the idea of how they're using it based off of what actually happened during the show, like the wavering confidence and everything like that. I don't know, I think thematically they feel pretty well on point.
Hmm. And at least from what I've seen, like more people who are more focused on like the competitive White Schwartz, I get the impression that they see some potential in these cards. Like, I don't think we've seen many of the super kind of like high level cards, like the double rare Zuko that was revealed in the content creator video. That's probably like one of the key cards from a deck that's probably going to be important. But they didn't even reveal the whole combo there because I think there's a level 3 Zuko, Azula, that hasn't been revealed yet. That's kind of part of that deck. So, we're going to get a better sense as more of the cards get revealed. The big thing probably to look for is what all the double rares are. I think there's going to be like 10 in the set. They're usually the kind of ones that show you that, like, okay, building, say, like a blue deck, you'll probably need like max copies of all the blue double rare to make the deck function as best possible. But it's exciting stuff, definitely, to keep an eye on. So that is that. And I guess after that, we will move into the Free Comic Book Day review. I suppose first, probably should talk about this because there's a little bit of kind of confusion about some stuff happening here, and it seems like because of what Avatar was joined with this year for the free comic, the Star Wars High Republic Adventures, it created some sort of licensing issues that meant that the free comic, this was one of the few that actually wasn't available in all regions. And it seems like for sure the UK was affected by this, but I'm not even sure if it was like every comic shop in the UK. I think there was some element of like what distributor was used, but at the very least, it seems like this free comic was not available everywhere. And there was some confusion around why this was. It all seems to come back to High Republic Adventures has some sort of a weird licensing issue where, like last year, it was under IDW, but now Dark Horse have the license, but under both publishers, they never had like full rights to the entire world, and Panini Comics randomly had the license to print some of it. It's a weird situation, and Avatar has been affected here. It seems like if you're in like America, North America, there was no issue, but I think everywhere else it was a little bit hit and miss if you were able to get it or not. But we have the comic here to talk about. So let's get into this. So the creative team here is script by Amy Chu, art and colors by Kelly Matthews and Nicole Matthews, lettering by Richard Starkings and Comic Craft's Jimmy Betancourt. And then the special thanks is kind of worth noting because they mention Avatar Studios. Special thanks to James Salerno and Jeff Whitman at Nickelodeon, and to Mike Bryan and Joan Hilty at Avatar Studios. So we've seen Avatar Studios mentioned on more recent comics, but it's interesting to still see it there. One weird thing here, though, is that on the cover, the like credits page for this book, the name of the comic is listed as Team Toph, whereas on the first page of the actual comic, it's called Lost and Found. I'm pretty sure Lost and Found is more of what the actual comic is going to be called, but it just speaks to like that's like I think 2 or 3 years in a row there's been errors on the credits page. Make of that what you will. So yeah, the comic itself, like I said, is called Lost and Found. That's what the first page says. So Greg, overall, before we get into it, what are your thoughts on this year's comic?
Yeah, I think overall it's a nice little, insert type of comic that, sort of fills in sort of a random period of time that we, might not have known what actually happened in terms of, just the day-to-day doings of, Team Avatar and their sort of journeys and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, for what they're going for here, it plays out pretty well. I guess gives you a little bit more of the characters and something that they may have come across during their journeys and their travels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, myself, it's one of those ones where it's a perfectly fine comic. It's fun, it's nice, but there's not a lot to it. It, like you say, it fills in a gap that, okay, it does an okay job at doing it, but it's not super memorable. And I think that's always going to be the problem with trying to insert stories and make them feel important in between episodes. It's kind of what affected Katara and the Pirate Silver, where it's like nothing particularly of note can happen to Katara in this one because it didn't happen in one of the episodes. And it feels roughly the same here, where like Toph is the focus, but do you need to know that you got to see this bit of Toph prior to this episode? Does it change anything? And the answer is kind of like not really. And in that sense, I think it means for me, it's probably the weakest free comic we've ever had, because it's so basic, so to the point, but also just knowing that we've had better free comics like most other times, like you know, the Korra meets Naga comic like stands out as being like basically the same number of pages, and it's like 10 times as interesting as what happens in this comic. Even like just 2 years ago, we had, I'd say, both the Iroh story in that one as well as Clearing the Air, the kind of like Tenzin backstory comic, were so much better than this. And especially because there's a bit of a weirdness about this one where like I think this comic was kind of meant to be in last year's free comic, that whole issue about like why did we get the Chibi comic preview in that, and it was the same creative team listed, and what happened there. I think that was said to be an Aang focused story, which this isn't. So did this creative team make a comic that just never got printed? I don't even know what happened. Like, where is the mistake in the whole process? It just adds up to like, if this is something they were holding on to for like 2 years, it wasn't really worth the wait, in my opinion. But let's go through it, because I want to make it clear, like, it's not a bad comic. It's just I expect a little bit more when we're like in the lead up to Avatar Studios, and they're specifically noting that like Avatar Studios were involved in this. This feels not where we need to be these, especially when like we're waiting for the like Azula comic to come out and hopefully get the comics back on track. This is not really kind of setting the stage super well. But first page here, we are on Appa. We have Katara, Momo, of course, Aang, Toph, and Sokka. This is where we get into a little bit of like, where is this set? It's before Bitter Work. That's the main thing that you get from this. Like, you find out later on in the comic, Aang has not started his earthbending training yet. So we're before Bitter Work. We're obviously after Blind Bandit. So the real question here is like, is this before or after the events of the chase? My personal take is that I think it's before the chase, because it feels like this is very early in Toph's time with the group, and that if she had had the kind of confrontation with Katara from the chase, it would have been referenced here. It feels like they don't know her well enough to even have that argument just yet, is my take on this. So what are your thoughts on that? Where specifically do you think this comic is set?
Yeah, no, that was actually pretty much the same thought I was having with it, because it doesn't feel like they don't have a good idea on, you know, how Toph actually will be as terms of a teacher, where you sort of get that sort of mention at sort of the end of the comic. So it feels like it's still, I guess you could say, like early days, and they don't seem to be like as stressed as well. Like, yeah, this incident sort of happened that they have to sort of deal with, but it doesn't feel like they're sort of like on edge as they could become later on as they're, traveling more and more together.
Yeah, and the chase begins with the group kind of like landing in like a clearing, and it sort of looks like we're in the general area of like the chase about to happen by the end of this. So I think that's basically where we're meant to be, that almost this is kind of what happens while Zuko alone is going on, effectively. So what happens here right at the start is Katara shows off some waterbending here. Toph's just kind of like, oh, you just showed off waterbending, didn't you? That's fine. Then Sokka shows off a kind of a thing that he can do, no one else can, which is that he can touch his nose with his tongue, which will come back later. Aang, of course, guiding Appa around, spots smoke nearby, so they go to land because they think it might be the Fire Nation. Um, so they land and they find a pretty wrecked town. Like it's very, very badly damaged. They're initially like, was this the Fire Nation? But Sokka feels it was more like bandits, I guess, because it's a very chaotic kind of mess in this town. Um, he then spots some footprints, and we get a little bit of Sokka tracking action in this comic, and so they kind of like head off into the kind of nearby kind of areas to try and do that. But just before they head off into the forest, Katara looks back and is like, wait, where's Toph and Momo? Why aren't they coming with us? And we'll get to that in a second. So, what are your thoughts on the opening 2 pages?
Yeah, I like that there's sort of, I guess sort of, they're flying around. They're still, being able to sort of like observe things. Like it looks like they're just sort of being aware of things and stuff like that. So I think, I don't know. I like that they still have, that sort of mindset while they're, typically sort of traveling and things like that. And they're just, they all have their, I guess, sort of differing opinions in terms of what could actually be going down. I like that Sokka, even though this comic is more about Toph, he gets a little bit of a spotlight here and even later on in terms of his actual skills, which is nice to see.
Yeah, like the Sokka's tracking skills, like don't come up like that much really. It felt like we used them a lot in like season 1, but then never overly used it beyond that. But it's nice to
Yeah.
see it kind of come up here again. So yeah, what are Toph and Momo doing? They are together. They clearly sense something's going on, and it becomes clear that I guess Momo's like animal instincts, animal senses, and then Toph with her seismic sense. The Aang is like, "Hey, Toph, come with us. We're looking for survivors," and she's like, "That's exactly what I'm doing." And this is probably where you get the sense that it's very early after Blind Bandit, because Katara's like, "Wait, she's just like touching the ground. How is she searching for survivors?" And Aang is like, "Well, she told me that this is how she actually sees, and she can feel the vibrations, and so she knows how to do this sort of thing." And Toph points out that someone is still here. Sokka's like, no one could have survived what happened here. Look at the mess of the town. And she just earthbends a bunch of rocks out of the way, and then sort of like carves her way into the ground. And you get a little bit of a montage here of her seismic sensing her way to eventually find this little girl who's like just in the ground, basically. Like, so there's a bit of a mystery about like, wait, given what happened to the town, how did she end up like this far in the earth? And so there's this kind of like tease of like, how did she end up in there? And so Toph brings the girl out, and the rest of the gang is kind of like, hey, what's your name? What happened here? Why aren't you talking? Toph kind of clears some way and is like, you're traumatizing the kid. And just after this is where they decide that, yeah, we should get back to following the trail that Sokka found earlier. So, what are your thoughts on these couple of pages here, where we actually get introduced? We haven't got the name just yet, but we get introduced to the sort of the unique character of.
Yeah, I think that the sort of introduction there and the way they're sort of like leading, for Toph to be able to sort of show off her abilities, since that's sort of how we started the episode with, Katara and her waterbending. I think, following that trend, it works well. Yeah, you can see that, they aren't, fully aware of what Toph can do yet. So like you said, they're still, sort of understanding that, since, both the brother and sister are sort of like not quite aware of what she's doing. And, Toph almost knocks Sokka out with sort of moving some of the debris out of the way, which she probably did that on purpose just because of her character here. But yeah, no, you definitely, I don't know. I like that Toph is sort of like, finding this character that's even younger than her, and she's already pretty young, so it's kind of funny to remember that all these characters are already really sort of young. So to find a character that's even younger than them is kind of interesting to see that that's how they're going forward with the story.
Mm-hmm. So the group now with this character walk into the forest. They're following Sokka, who's following the trail. Toph introduces herself like, I'm a really good earthbender, and it's like, hey, this is Katara, this is Sokka, and Aang is the Avatar, and I'm going to teach him how to earth. Also introduces Momo as well. The girl kind of does introduce herself at this point. She says her name is Lumi, Luumi. She then asks Toph, did you lose your shoes like I did? Is that why you don't have any on? But Toph is just like, nope. Being barefoot lets me earthbend better than anyone. Plus, it feels great. And immediately, Lumi kicks off her one remaining shoe. So you get the first sort of like tease of like, oh, is this how she ended up like literally like in the house, like in the ground in the house? The tease here is actually kind of nice here, but we'll do the next page as well. So they come out into a little bit of a clearing. Sokka says he's lost the trail. They decide that they're going to rest. Toph grabs Sokka's last bit of blubbered seal jerky and gives it to Lumi. So you can see Toph being sort of protective of Lumi in all of this. He does his tongue touch his nose thing again, and it makes a little laugh. Then she does some earthbending, which again also super impresses Lumi here. She's very impressed with Toph. And then it's like, hey, do you want to go for a ride, kid? And we'll see what happens in just a second. But what are your thoughts on these two pages as we, I suppose, get properly introduced to Lumi?
Yeah, I like the little sort of like bonding act that they have going on here with sort of the younger character, making her sort of feel comfortable in the group. And yeah, it is interesting that they do sort of do, I guess, sort of a little bit of tease with sort of the taking off the shoe there. Although, no, she doesn't do any sort of like bending or anything that we see there. So it's just sort of like being impressed. But, the fact that she's more impressed by that than anything else, I guess, sort of keys you into things that might come later on.
Mm-hmm. So then we cut to basically the rest of the survivors from this attack on the village. They're just in the forest and they hear this rumble happening. We cut to kind of like an elderly couple and they're like, ooh, that almost sounds like laughing. And then Toph charges by on her kind of like rolling boulder kind of movement thing that she does. We've seen her use a few times, and Lumi's right there next to her and having a great time. So they call out to Lumi, and she's like, oh, Grandma, Grandpa, and she kind of hops off and goes over to them. And so this is where we finally find out what actually happened to Katara. Asks, are you from the village? What's happened? They say, we're all that's left. The bandits came in the middle of the night. They extorted us for years. This year we took a stand, so they burned everything down. We managed to slip out and ran towards the village, the river. We hid until one of us saw your sky bison land. And throughout all this, we're getting visuals of, yes, it's a bunch of bandits on like ostrich horses who are not benders, it seems like, but they just used like flame torches, light the village on fire. And they completely, you can see here, just set the whole place on fire. And obviously in the commotion, they lost track of where Lumi was. Surprised to see like, hey, she's here. And they're like, and her grandfather's like, well, it's truly a miracle. How did little Lumi survive? And this is where Katara is like, maybe it has something to do with that. As we cut over to see Toph watching Lumi do some kind of like basic earthbending here in a kind of classic kind of horse stance going on. Her grandparents are like, oh, an earthbender. And the grandmother notes that Lumi's mother was one too. And they're like, thank you so much. We will return to the village. Lumi can help us rebuild because she's an earthbender. She hugs Toph goodbye. Aang says yip yip. And Toph gets a little bit of praise from Katara here. You were really good with Lumi back there, Toph. You sound surprised. And then Sokka says, I bet training Aang will be a piece of cake. And this is where Toph says, so about that, kind of teasing a little bit of what's, I guess, about to happen in Bitter Work. And that is the end comic. So what are your thoughts here on ending here? We get the little bit of backstory. We meet Lumi's grandparents. We get the reveal that Lumi is an earthbender. And we very quickly kind of move on from this little side story.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the conclusion of this was, nice and sort of works along the lines of probably what many people sort of predicted. But no, I think it's nice to get to see sort of this reuniting of the family. And, I guess you still get to understand that, there's turmoil happening in the Earth Kingdom and things aren't quite as well as they could be. But, they give you some sort of hope that, they can rebuild, they can move on from this. So that's sort of the sort of overall idea that they're always sort of trying to go for here. And it's nice to see this new character sort of being involved with our team here, and to see this sort of connection that they have, which is something that they sort of always do during the travel. So it definitely fits in line with everything that we've seen from our team avatar here, as well, sort of leading us into how Toph might be good at doing this training, or how she might not be good at doing this sort of training with Aang, which is her whole sort of purpose for being with the team.
Yeah, like I think that you can see like little bits of like kind of strong potential that like if this comic was allowed to be a little bit longer, that you could have actually turned this into something interesting, made it like a proper like episode of the show, like because like there feels like there's like a bit of emotion here within this family, that like Louis's mother was an earthbender, but like was she killed in the like raid that just happened here, or did she die like years ago or something like that, and why? Like, was her mother like part of the resistance against the Fire Nation? It feels like there's like a little bit of like implied backstory there, just because like Lumi's parents aren't around and she is being raised by her grandparents, which is interesting. Um, yes, there's a little bit you could maybe read into right at the end about like, oh, she's actually really good with Lumi, and kind of like teaches her a little bit of basic earthbending, like showing that she has the potential to be a good teacher. But then it's almost like she approaches training Aang with the wrong attitude, and then has to go through bitter work to realize at the end that like, oh yeah, the gentle touch you showed with Lumi, you should probably do that with Aang as well. um, there's that sort of kind of idea here as well, which is I think kind of interesting. Um, anything else to say? Like, the bandits sort of have kind of interesting designs, but there's not really much to say about them because they're only like in one panel. Um, so yeah, like a basic story done reasonably well, but it's one of those things where it's not a particularly notable story overall. We've had better free comics. This is fine for what it is, but like I say, in 2023, I expect a bit more than just this. But what are your final thoughts on this comic?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it's okay. It fills in sort of a unknown gap of time. It adds like a little bit more to our characters, but not too much that you would really be missing it. I think if they had like some sort of crazy foresight, it would have been cool if this sort of was referenced, like you said before, in terms of like, oh, this is something that would have been helpful in terms of like a reference point in training, stuff like that. But as it stands, sort of like alone on its own, it's just sort of this sort of mini thing that sort of adds a little bit, but not too much overall, and it probably will be on the low side, if not the bottom of most people's top favorites of these sort of side comics, considering I don't know, it's in the middle of a time period, which doing anything in the middle of sort of like the show or the episodes or anything like that, unless it's sort of a really sort of like like a specific thing that people are already sort of clamoring for, it kind of gets sort of thrown to the wayside, unfortunately.
Yeah, like I think this comic has a little bit of kind of like elements of kind of some of the weaknesses of like Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy, where in that comic she met Sun, the lava bender, and then right at the end, it's like Toph is finally going to train Sun and learn about like lava bending and help this character to control their lava bending, and the comic ends, and you're like, will we ever see this again? And it's like, maybe it feels like just because lava bending is involved in that one, we'll maybe address a little bit of that to establish Toph's familiarity with that technique. But it's like Lumi here, who you'd almost want to see kind of what happens, but it almost feels like this feels like a character who's kind of like the Great Divide leaders treatment of like, it would have been cool if these characters returned at some point, but it doesn't look like that's maybe going to happen. But if we saw Lumi again a few years on, older, that would be interesting. What if she turns out to have the potential to be a metal bender and she trains at the academy? That would be nice, but it's extending so much onto the story that's not really there, is kind of part of the problem there. But it's one of those ones where it's solid but nothing incredible. and hopefully we get better stories going forward. We're still in a bit of a transition point for the comics in general. We're expecting quite a lot from the Azula comic. On the Korra side of things, the next one is going to be the first of these Korra one-shots, this trilogy they're talking about that's going to be Mako focused. That comic still hasn't been like properly announced yet, so we don't know particularly what to expect there in terms of like, will that one more be in line with Katara and the Pirate Silver, or will that be more of a Suki alone, Azula and the Spirit Temple style comic, where it's more notable about Mako, or is it just going to be a kind of random incident involving Mako? That's the kind of one confusing point, is that it feels like novels are doing well, Avatar Generations is now doing well, the Legend RPG has its own way of expanding the kind of franchise, but the comics, which has been such like an important thing for years in terms of expansion, kind of feels like they're a little lost at the moment. So I hope they can get back on track. But do you have any thoughts about the kind of current like trajectory of the comics, and do you think we'll see improvement as we move on to future releases?
I mean, I really hope we get improvements as we move on to future releases. But I mean, with everything with, having to be interconnected and, the timelines and stuff like that, I don't know. It's really hard to sort of, gauge or predict where they're exactly going to go with things. I mean, we've gotten some one shots and those are cool and everything, and we sort of got used to before having sort of the three parters and how those worked out, which I think, generally most people would say that most of those have been pretty good if they've gotten through and reading them. I mean, yes, some of them are a bit weaker than others, but overall they seem to be received pretty fairly well. So I mean, I definitely hope they get back to that. But I don't know how we're going to, how much of a focus that's going to have with, the bigger projects, which obviously would take more priority in the pipeline. But I mean, I definitely see potential for it. There's tons of, media tie-ins or things they can do in between that could be working, at the same time as other projects that would be really cool for those of us who are, interested in picking up those other forms of media. So I definitely hope that they do and, see the viability and, the profits or whatever in making that stuff, come to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at least for me, like, I really hope that as we go forward, like, Dark Horse can begin to use the kind of other eras of Avatar a little bit more, because I look at like a comic like this and I almost feel like if they even did like an equivalent story to this, but it was like, say, involving like Kyoshi and Rangi or something like that, like it was just like set somewhere like after like Shadow of Kyoshi, and it's just a small little incident for those characters. That's a good way to do it, because people want more content with those characters, whereas we have so much content with like Toph, Katara, Aang, that you have to do something like big to make us care, which is why the movie is going to be so important. Well, with Kyoshi, like a little moment like this would actually be quite helpful, because we almost want a little bit of the kind of more kind of fillery style content for some of those characters, whereas it really stands out as like, you don't know what to do here, do you? With these characters, but hopefully they can do that, because especially when like Patterns in Time didn't really deliver quite what we expected, if they're going to do more short story collections, I feel making them multi-era, be able to do stuff in the other generations of Avatar, is probably the best way to kind of open it up and just create a further interest. Like, still have an Avatar story, still include a Korra story, but use the other ones as well. Because of course they're going to have a book to reprint, for instance, this comic. So it's not only available as a free comic that wasn't available in multiple regions. And I think like the Iroh comic from 2 years ago still needs a reprint. Beach Wars from last year's is going to need to be collected somewhere, and it kind of feels like it's going to take an eternity for them to do two separate short story things. So why not do like an Avatar Legends short? So you can just add Avatar and Korra stuff in as well. But who knows what the deal is there. They might not have the license for anything except Avatar and Korra. We don't actually know how that exactly works. But yeah, that's been the free comic book day book for 2023. We never know if we're going to get one the kind of like next year. We'll find out, I think, in December probably, if we are going to get one for next year. I hope they do. I'd like to see the return to the Avatar Korra format, or another generation perhaps. But we never know what's particularly going to happen. But that's basically been it for this episode of the podcast. We will be back next time out for episode 260, and we pretty much, unless something crazy happens in terms of news or releases, getting back to our Avatar and Korra rewatches with some episodes there that we skipped over here to focus on like some bigger pieces of news and this comic release. But we'll get back to that next time out, and then the podcast after that, more than likely, I guess, should be our first. Oh no, I'm getting my months mixed up here. The Yang Chen book's out July, not June, but we're building up to that. We're getting there. Like it won't be too many episodes until we're around to Yang Chen content. So do keep that in mind. Comic-Con is coming up, and it's always a bit of a coin flip about if they're going to deliver anything. But let's not forget, last San Diego Comic-Con, they actually did an Avatar Studios update. They told us the movie was Aang focused, and they at least did something like that. So the expectation is for some sort of an update. So I suppose that will be the final little discussion here. For like, say, Comic-Con coming up, I suppose SDCC or NYCC, do you think they'll say anything this year, or will we be waiting for 2024 for the big updates?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, since we got this sort of like leaked image, I mean, I could see them making maybe some sort of like just sort of mention of it, not really announcement, just maybe sort of a mention. Because I don't know. I feel like even now is still too far out. Maybe New York Comic Con, because that's later in the year, they might say something a little bit more. But for SDCC, since that's a lot sooner, I don't know. I don't feel like we're gonna have anything from that one. Maybe sort of a side mention, but who knows? Maybe they'll grace us with something.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose we should mention a little bit of just like Netflix Avatar continues to be in a extraordinarily kind of weird position where like almost every week we're almost like expecting there to be some sort of an update on it. The general perception, I think, at the moment seems to be that potentially like the first pass with the CG maybe wasn't quite up to standard, so they're putting extra time in to make it as best possible. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing similar things with the One Piece show. They're almost being like linked together in that sense, where like there's maybe criticism directed at the CG on the One Piece show, and be worried about the same thing for Avatar, and that's maybe why it's being held back from potentially what I think was planned to be a summer release to maybe fall, or potentially even, I think there's been some rumors about it being delayed into next year. I really don't know what to make of it, because I'm at the point with that show where I'm just like, show me something. How do we have a leaked image of Avatar Studios before we have like an image from this show? That's the crazy thing, that we're ahead on the 2025 project compared to the potential 2023 project. But do you have any quick thoughts on Netflix before we wrap up the podcast?
No, I don't. No, I don't have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's just confusing. But yeah, that's been episode 259 of the Avatar Online podcast. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye-bye.